My name is Corinne, I'm 52 years old, and last week my son-in-law tried to break into my villa. That sentence still feels unreal when I say it out loud. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, standing behind reinforced glass, watching the man who once promised to love my daughter pound on my gate with a crowbar. But that's exactly what happened, and it all began with a few quiet suspicions I chose to ignore. For most of my life, I've been a planner. After my husband passed away 8 years ago, I poured my energy into building the life we'd dreamed of together. We'd bought a stunning villa overlooking the ocean, a peaceful retreat on the outskirts of town. I kept it maintained, filled it with memories and light, and built a small garden that became my sanctuary. When my daughter Naomi married Jason, I thought maybe that house could also become her refuge one day. I never imagined it would become the battleground it did. Naomi and Jason met at a charity event I'd sponsored. He was handsome, charming, and appeared ambitious, exactly the kind of man a mother would want for her daughter. But there was something in his eyes, a kind of restlessness that didn't sit right with me. I told myself I was being overprotective. After all, Naomi was 28, independent, and deeply in love. When they got married, I gave them my blessing and even helped them with a down payment for their first apartment. For a while, they seemed happy. But Jason's true nature began to show slowly, like cracks spreading through glass. Naomi started visiting me more often, her smiles a little tighter each time. She'd mentioned Jason's impulsive spending, how he'd taken out loans without telling her, and how he'd lost money in business ventures that always seemed to go nowhere. When she finally confessed that he'd been gambling online, I felt my stomach drop. I offered her my guest room for a few days to get some space and think. Those few days turned into weeks. Jason grew more volatile, calling constantly, begging one moment and screaming the next. Naomi blocked his number after one particularly nasty call, and that's when his tone shifted from desperate to threatening. It wasn't long before I started noticing strange things: missed calls from unknown numbers, cars idling a little too long outside my gate. I installed new security cameras just to be safe. One night, Naomi showed me a string of messages from Jason saying he was done being disrespected and that he was coming to get what's his. I felt a chill when I read those words. What he thought was his, I couldn't imagine, but I had a feeling it wasn't just about Naomi. I'd long suspected that Jason had an eye on my property. He'd made offhand comments about family inheritance or shared assets more than once during family dinners. I had never taken him seriously, but now I wondered if I should have. That villa wasn't just a house, it was everything my husband and I built from nothing. The thought of Jason even setting foot there without permission filled me with rage. Naomi, frightened but resolute, told me she was filing for divorce. I supported her completely, even though I knew it would provoke him. Jason didn't handle rejection well. The next day he called me directly, his voice slurred and sharp. "You think you can hide her from me? I'll come and settle things face to face," he said. I hung up, blocked his number, and alerted our local police department that he might show up. They advised me to call immediately if he did. I went to bed that night with every light in the house on and every door locked. Naomi stayed in the guest room upstairs. The wind outside was fierce, and I tried to tell myself every creak and sound was just the storm. But deep down, I felt something was coming. I couldn't sleep, so I sat in my study, sipping tea and watching the security monitor beside me. For hours, there was nothing. Just darkness, the occasional sway of palm trees, and the rhythm of waves in the distance. Then, around midnight, I saw them headlights, slowly crawling up the long road that led to my villa. My heart dropped. No one should have been out there that late. The lights stopped at the gate, idling for a moment, before 3 shadows emerged. I leaned forward and zoomed in on the feed. My blood ran cold when I saw his face. Late that night, I saw headlights approaching my villa gates. When I looked through the security feed, I saw Jason, and he wasn't alone. There he was, standing at my front gate with 3 men I'd never seen before. They looked drunk, swaying slightly, their laughter echoing through the speakers on my monitor. My hands began to tremble, but I forced myself to stay calm. I turned down the lights in the study and watched as Jason pounded on the gate, yelling Naomi's name like some deranged intruder rather than the husband he once pretended to be. Naomi rushed into the room, pale and terrified. "Mom, is that him?" she whispered, clutching her phone. I nodded silently, motioning for her to keep her voice down. Jason shouted again, slurring, "Naomi, come out, I just want to talk." But the tone in his voice wasn't one of someone seeking conversation, it was rage disguised as reason. His friends cheered him on, banging the metal bars of my gate with a stick they'd found somewhere. I immediately pulled out my phone and started recording the monitor. Every second of this had to be documented. "Stay upstairs," I whispered to Naomi. "Don't say a word." She nodded and hurried back to her room. Jason's voice boomed again through the night air. "You think you can hide her from me, Corinne? She's my wife, and this house is half hers." That line made my blood boil. Half hers? Naomi had never even lived here since our marriage. It was my husband's and mine, legally and emotionally. Jason was showing his hand. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about ownership, about control. I tapped into the intercom and said evenly, "Jason, you need to leave right now. I've already called the police." His response was instant and furious. "You're bluffing, old woman. You think I'm scared of you?" He laughed. A cruel, drunken sound that made my stomach twist. One of his friends, a tall man in a leather jacket, looked uneasy. "Man, maybe we should go. This doesn't look good," he muttered. But Jason wasn't listening. He grabbed the bars of the gate and shook them violently. "Naomi, get down here before I make your mother regret this," he screamed. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay calm even though my heart was pounding. "Jason, step away from my property. You're being recorded. If you break anything, it's all evidence." He turned toward the camera and smirked. "Good," he sneered. "Then record me taking what's mine." At that moment, I noticed one of his friends pulling something from the back of their truck, a crowbar. My throat went dry. "You're not serious," I murmured to myself. But Jason snatched it from the man's hands with a wild grin. He turned back toward the gate and slammed the metal hard. The sound reverberated through the night, sharp and violent. Naomi screamed from upstairs, unable to hold it in any longer. "Jason, stop!" she cried. That only seemed to fuel him more. He slammed the crowbar again, the clang echoing through the speakers. Sparks flickered where metal met metal. "Naomi!" I shouted. "Stay upstairs, do not come down." My voice shook, but I couldn't let him see fear. I called 911 again, whispering into the phone. "This is Corinne Hill at Oceanside Villa. The intruder has started to damage property. He's armed with a crowbar." The dispatcher assured me that officers were on their way. I gave her every detail: 4 men, a black pickup truck, visible damage, to the gate. I hung up and watched, jaw clenched, as Jason continued his rampage. His friends were no longer laughing. 2 stood back, nervously glancing at the road, while the third muttered something about cameras everywhere. Jason, though, was lost in his rage. His words turned incoherent as he shouted about being disrespected and cut out. I realized in that moment just how unhinged he'd become. This wasn't just drunken anger, this was desperation. He wanted to assert control, to prove something. The gate was beginning to bend under the repeated blows. My security lights illuminated his face, sweat dripping, eyes wild, jaw clenched tight. I felt an unfamiliar calm wash over me. Fear gave way to focus. I whispered to myself, "You're not winning this time, Jason." Another loud crash filled the night, followed by a metallic screech that made my stomach drop. I knew that sound, it was the gate's hinge snapping. Jason let out a triumphant shout, stepping back with the crowbar resting on his shoulder like a trophy. Jason suddenly grabbed a crowbar and started attacking the gate. The sound of metal slamming against iron echoed through the night. Each strike of Jason's crowbar sent vibrations through the villa walls, a harsh reminder that this was no drunken bluff he was trying to get in. I stood by the monitor, jaw tight, forcing myself to breathe evenly. The flashing security lights lit up his face like a spotlight, catching every bit of fury in his eyes. He was beyond reasoning now. Naomi's sobs echoed faintly from upstairs. I grabbed the intercom again, my voice low but firm. Naomi, stay in your room. Don't move, don't make a sound. She whispered back, trembling. Mom, he's going to break in, what do we do? I wanted to tell her everything would be fine, but I couldn't lie to her. Instead, I said, trust me, sweetheart. I've got this. I turned my attention back to the cameras. Jason's friends were shifting uneasily. One of them, the man in the leather jacket, kept glancing toward the street. Jason. The cops are going to be here any minute, he warned. Jason swung around and barked. Then let them come. I'm not leaving until I get what's mine. His voice cracked, caught between rage and panic. Inside, I pressed the record button again on my phone, zooming in to catch his license plate this time. I knew from experience that evidence mattered more than emotion. Every second of this would prove what kind of man he truly was. I whispered under my breath, you picked the wrong woman to threaten. The crowbar hit the gate again. A loud screech followed as the top latch twisted. Jason grunted, stepping back and wiping sweat from his forehead. See? She can't stop me, he told his friends, laughing bitterly. One of them muttered, man, this isn't right. Let's go. But Jason glared at him. You think she can keep my wife prisoner? You think I'll let her take my life away? That's when I realized this wasn't about love, or even the house, it was about power. Jason couldn't stand losing control of Naomi. He couldn't stand being told no. I kept the line open to the dispatcher. They're still outside, I whispered. They've started breaking the gate. Please hurry. The operator reassured me officers were minutes away. The gate's bolt finally snapped, the metallic crack slicing through the air. Jason roared in victory. His friends backed away, realizing what he'd done had crossed a line. Jason, you just broke into private property, one of them said. Jason ignored him, his chest heaving, sweat glistening under the lights. He threw the crowbar down and kicked the gate open. The heavy metal door swung inward with a groan. Naomi, he shouted. I'm coming in and you better not make me chase you. From my vantage point on the security screen, I watched him step inside the property line. He paused for a moment, scanning the front of the villa like a predator studying its prey. My pulse thudded in my ears, but I refused to move from my post. I knew what my late husband would have said, don't let fear run your home. Jason's friends stayed by the truck, whispering nervously. The man in the jacket took out his phone, maybe to record or maybe to call someone, but Jason snapped at him, don't you dare. I'm handling this. Then he started walking up the stone path leading to the front porch, every step echoing in the quiet night. I whispered, lights. And the villa's motion sensors triggered again. Bright white light flooded the yard, catching him completely off guard. He flinched, raising a hand to his face. What the? He muttered, spinning toward the cameras. I grabbed the intercom mic. Jason, you're trespassing, I said clearly. Police are already on their way. If you take one more step, you'll regret it. He laughed a short, ugly sound. You think you scare me? This is Naomi's home too. He spat. I didn't answer. Instead, I hit another button, activating the villa's perimeter alarm. A sharp, piercing siren wailed through the night, echoing down the coastal road. His friends jumped, startled, and one shouted, Jason, man, we gotta go. She's serious. But Jason didn't leave. He picked up the crowbar again, eyes fixed on the front door like a challenge. He raised it high, his silhouette stark against the light, and struck the gate one last time as if daring the world to stop him. The sound reverberated through the yard and then silence. The gate, bent and twisted, hung open. He smirked, tossing the crowbar aside, and took one deliberate step forward onto the driveway. The gate burst open, and Jason stepped onto the property. The moment Jason's shoes hit my driveway, I knew the game had changed. He wasn't just a furious husband anymore, he was an intruder, crossing into my home as if he had any right to be there. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, but I forced myself to think clearly. The villa's inner doors were solid oak, reinforced with steel locks, but if he managed to reach them, there'd be real damage. I had to keep control of the situation until the police arrived. From the second-floor landing, I could see everything through the large window overlooking the front lawn. Jason was pacing like a caged animal, scanning the villa's facade for any sign of movement. His friends lingered by the gate, arguing among themselves. One was already in the truck, urging the others to leave. Jason turned, furious. "Don't you move that truck!" he barked, voice cracking with rage. "We came here to settle this." I dialed the police again, whispering into the receiver. "He's on my property now," I said. He broke the gate and entered the grounds. "He's armed. Please, hurry." The operator told me the nearest unit was 3 minutes away. 3 minutes. That might as well have been forever. Downstairs, Jason stomped toward the porch. The motion lights followed him like spotlights. He hammered his fists against the door, shouting Naomi's name again and again. "Naomi, you think you can just run off with my life savings? You owe me everything." Naomi appeared at the top of the stairs, eyes wide with terror. "Mom," she whispered. "What do we do?" "Stay there," I said firmly. "Don't say a word." I could see the tears in her eyes. She was shaking, and I knew her heart was breaking. No one ever expects the man they love to turn into a stranger like this. Jason's blows grew louder. The door shook under his weight, the wood creaking. "Naomi!" he bellowed. "If you don't come out, I'll break it down myself." I stood halfway down the stairs, holding my phone steady as I continued to record. My hand trembled, but my voice didn't. "Jason, you need to leave. You're committing a crime right now." He turned his head toward my voice, eyes narrowing. "There you are," he snarled. "You think this place is all yours, huh? This fancy villa, these fancy gates, none of it would exist without me. You used me." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of his claim, but the fury in his eyes stopped me. "Jason," I said coldly. "This house was built before you were even in the picture. You're trespassing. Leave now before you destroy what little dignity you have left." He didn't move. Instead, he smirked and kicked the door again. The sound echoed through the marble hallway. I watched tiny splinters of wood chip away from the frame. Each impact came faster, harder. He was unraveling. Naomi whimpered behind me. "Mom, please, let's hide." "No," I whispered. "We don't run from bullies." I thought of my late husband, of how much he'd worked to build this home with his own hands. Every tile, every stone carried his memory. Jason's chaos wouldn't taint that legacy. Not now, not ever. I stepped closer to the locked door, standing just behind it. "Jason," I shouted through the heavy wood. "The police are almost here. This is your last warning." There was silence for a moment, just the sound of him breathing heavily on the other side. Then, with a low growl, he said, "You think I'm scared of the cops? You've taken everything from me, Corinne. Everything." I backed away slowly toward the stairs, still keeping the phone recording. The sound of his boots scuffing the porch made me feel sick. My fingers hovered over the panic button on my phone's app that would send an emergency alert to the security system. Then came the final crash. A violent kick, followed by the unmistakable sound of cracking wood. The lock held for a split second longer, then gave way with a thunderous pop. The door swung open, the latch snapping like a gunshot. Jason stumbled forward, into the foyer, chest heaving, his face twisted in triumph and rage. "Told you I'd get in," he spat. I took a single step backward up the stairs, phone still raised, my voice steady even though my hands were trembling. "Congratulations," I said quietly. "You just broke into your mother-in-law's house on camera." He froze for half a second, realizing what I'd just said. But the madness in his eyes returned almost instantly. Jason kicked the door once more and it cracked open. He stepped inside my home as if he owned it. The night air rushed in behind him, carrying the scent of salt and rain. Jason's boots left wet, muddy prints across the marble floor my husband once polished by hand. He looked around the foyer like he was surveying property he believed belonged to him, his jaw tight, his nostrils flaring with every angry breath. I stood frozen halfway up the staircase, phone still recording, refusing to let him think I was afraid. "Jason," I said sharply, "you need to stop. Right now." My voice came out stronger than I expected. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe it was the years of watching men like him think they could intimidate women into silence. Not this time. He tilted his head, that same arrogant smirk curling on his lips. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he slurred. "But you don't get to hide Naomi from me. She's my wife. Everything that's hers is mine too, and that includes this place." My stomach twisted. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice calm. "Naomi doesn't belong to anyone, Jason, and this house sure as hell doesn't belong to you." Behind me, I heard the faint creak of a floorboard upstairs. Naomi was moving. Jason's eyes darted toward the sound, and his smirk widened. "There she is," he muttered. "Naomi, get down here. Don't you dare move another step." I barked, stepping forward and gripping the stair railing. He turned his attention back to me, laughing. "Oh, come on, Corinne. What are you gonna do, lecture me to death?" He started walking deeper into the living room, running his hand along the back of the sofa, knocking over a glass vase as he went. The crash made Naomi gasp. He turned toward the sound, pointing upward. "You hear that? She's scared. She should be." Every instinct in me wanted to scream, to throw something, to physically shove him out, but I couldn't risk provoking him further. I kept my voice low, steady. "Jason, you've already broken the law. You're being recorded on 3 cameras. Leave now, and maybe you can still explain yourself to the police." He sneered. "Police? You think I care? I'm not scared of some small-town cop showing up to babysit a spoiled widow." He picked up a framed photo from the mantel, a picture of my husband holding Naomi as a child, and stared at it for a moment before letting it fall, face down onto the floor. The sound of the frame cracking echoed like a gunshot in my chest. Something inside me snapped. "Put that down!" My voice boomed through the open room, sharper than I'd intended. Jason looked up, surprised for a second, then grinned again. "Touchy, touchy," he said, stepping on the photo with his muddy boot. That was the moment fear turned to fury. I walked down 2 more steps until I stood tall enough to meet his eyes. "You think you can just walk into my house, threaten my daughter, and destroy my husband's memory? You don't scare me, Jason. You never did." He stared at me, his smirk faltering just slightly. I saw the uncertainty flash across his face, the realization that the control he'd always had over Naomi didn't work on me. "Where's Naomi?" he barked. "I'm not leaving until she comes down here and tells me to my face she's done." Naomi's trembling voice came from upstairs. "Jason, please stop. I don't want to see you." Jason froze, his expression shifting from anger to disbelief. "What did you just say?" "I said I don't want to see you," she repeated, stronger this time. "I'm done, Jason. I'm done with you." His entire body stiffened. His hands clenched into fists. "You think you can just walk away?" he growled. "You think you can leave me with nothing?" I moved down 1 more step, placing myself directly between him and the staircase. "You heard her," I said. "You're leaving now." He glared at me, eyes wild. Teeth clenched so hard his jaw twitched. "Get out of my way, Corinne. Not a chance." He took 1 step toward me, and for a heartbeat, the entire room went silent, no sound except the rain and his boots on the marble. I tightened my grip on the banister, adrenaline rushing through my veins. Naomi gasped from upstairs, her voice shaking. "Mom, don't let him." Jason turned toward her voice and started up the stairs. Every step he took toward my daughter fueled something fierce inside me. Jason's boots hit each stair like a countdown. Naomi's terrified breathing echoed from above, and the sight of him, this man who once smiled at our dinner table, climbing toward her with fury in his eyes, was almost too much to bear. I moved fast, placing myself directly in his path halfway up the staircase. "Jason," I said, my voice low and hard. "You're not going up there." He stopped for a split second, looking at me like I was nothing but an obstacle. "Move, Corinne," he hissed, gripping the railing. "This is between me and my wife." I stood my ground. "You lost the right to call her that the moment you raised your voice at her. The moment you broke my gate. The moment you stepped into my home uninvited. You're not a husband right now, you're a criminal. He sneered, leaning closer. Criminal? For trying to talk to my wife? His breath reeked of whiskey. You think you can turn her against me, but you can't erase what we have. She'll come back. You'll see. I felt my pulse hammering in my neck, but I didn't move. Jason, I've recorded everything. The police are on their way. If you take one more step, that's breaking and entering with intent to harm. He chuckled darkly. You think I'm scared of the cops? Then, in one sudden motion, he lunged forward, grabbing the banister just inches from me. I didn't flinch. I simply lifted my phone higher, camera steady, the screen glowing between us. You want to hit something, Jason? I said quietly. Then hit the record button. Because everything you do right now goes straight to the police. His eyes flicked to the phone, then back to me. For the first time, there was a flicker of hesitation. You're bluffing, he muttered. But his voice didn't sound so sure anymore. I tilted the phone just enough for him to see the blinking red light. Try me. He hesitated, breathing heavily, the tension thick between us. Upstairs, Naomi cried out. Jason, stop. I'm done. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Jason froze. His head turned toward the top of the stairs where Naomi stood, her face pale but her voice strong. I said I'm done, she shouted again. You've scared me for the last time. Jason's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His grip on the railing tightened, knuckles white. You don't mean that, he said finally, his tone almost pleading. Naomi stood taller, her tears glistening in the hallway light. I do. I'm done living in fear. I'm done being your excuse for failure. Jason's face twisted into something ugly, half rage and half heartbreak. You can't do this to me, he roared, slamming his hand against the wall so hard the picture frames rattled. Naomi flinched but didn't back away. I took a step closer, my voice razor sharp. She can. And she just did. He spun toward me, eyes wild. You shut up. You turned her against me. You ruined everything. His voice cracked under the weight of his own fury. He raised his hand as if to point, or maybe to strike, but the second he did, I said one word, stop. Something in my tone must have reached him, because he froze mid-motion. I held my ground, eyes locked on his. You're done, Jason, I said. You've lost control. And everyone can see it now. You're standing in a house that's covered with cameras, surrounded by evidence, and every second you stay here digs your hole deeper. He started to speak, but then it happened, the sound I'd been waiting for all night. In the distance, a sharp wail rose and echoed through the air. Police sirens. Jason's eyes darted toward the window. You called them? He spat. I told you I would, I said simply. He looked toward Naomi again, his expression collapsing into desperation. Naomi, please, he begged. Just come with me, and we'll fix this. I can change. She shook her head slowly. No, Jason. You already showed me who you are. The sirens grew louder. Blue and red lights flashed against the villa walls. Jason backed down one step, breathing fast, panic replacing his arrogance. He glanced at the door, realizing his escape was closing fast. I lowered my phone slightly and said quietly, It's over. Suddenly, police sirens wailed outside. The flashing blue lights finally painted his arrogance in fear. Through the window, I could see 2 patrol cars screech to a halt by the gate. Red and blue lights washing over the wet pavement. Jason froze mid-step on the staircase, his chest rising and falling fast. The confident smirk he'd worn all night was gone, replaced by something raw panic. Jason, I said, lowering my voice. You need to drop whatever's in your hand and walk downstairs slowly. He turned toward me, his breathing shallow. You called the cops on me? Your own family? His voice cracked, disbelief written all over his face. You stopped being family the moment you broke through my gate, I said. Don't make this worse than it already is. Outside, the sirens cut off, replaced by firm, commanding voices. Police! Step out with your hands visible, one of the officers shouted through a loudspeaker. Jason's friends were already running for their truck, scrambling to get away. Tires squealed as they sped off, leaving him alone in the blinding lights. Jason turned back toward me, panic flooding his features. You set me up, he said quietly, almost as if he couldn't believe it himself. You wanted this. I took a slow step down the stairs, keeping my tone even. No, Jason. You did this to yourself. You came here tonight thinking you could scare us, that you could take what doesn't belong to you. But what you actually did was show everyone who you really are. He looked toward the door again. The sound of officers shouting instructions filled the air. Step away from the entrance. Hands above your head. Jason clenched his fists, looking like a man cornered by the truth. Then, in a sudden burst of anger, he shouted, They can't arrest me. This is my wife's house. I glared at him. It's my house. Naomi never lived here, and you know it. Every inch of this place is in my name. Jason, you've got no claim here, no right, and no power left. For a second, I thought he'd come charging up the stairs again. Instead, he dropped the crowbar, the metal clanging against the floor. He exhaled heavily, defeated. You think you've won, Corinne? He muttered. You think this is over? I didn't respond. I just pointed toward the door. Go. Right now. The front door burst open. 2 officers stormed in, weapons drawn, voices booming. Police! Hands where we can see them! Jason raised his hands slowly, backing away from the stairs. It's a misunderstanding, he stammered, his voice suddenly small. I just came to talk to my wife. Sir, step down slowly, one officer commanded. We've got reports of property damage and forced entry. Naomi appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching the banister, trembling but standing tall. He broke in, she said, her voice breaking but clear. He tried to hurt us. Jason looked up at her with something like betrayal in his eyes. Naomi, no, don't do this, he pleaded. You know I'd never hurt you. Her tears glistened under the flashing lights. You already did, she said softly. The officers moved fast, pulling Jason's hands behind his back. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the foyer. He didn't fight it, but his words turned venomous again as they led him toward the door. This isn't over, Corinne. You think you can destroy my life? I'll come back. You'll see. Not if the law has anything to say about it, I replied coldly. One of the officers stayed behind to take my statement while the others escorted Jason out. I could hear him shouting as they pushed him toward the patrol car, his voice carrying through the night like a wounded animal. Naomi sank down on the top step, shaking uncontrollably. I climbed up to her and wrapped my arms around her shoulders. It's okay, I whispered. He's gone. You're safe now. But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't entirely true. Jason had crossed a line most men don't come back from. His rage wasn't something that could be locked away easily. I'd seen it in his eyes as they took him out. He wasn't finished. The officer beside me nodded respectfully as he closed his notepad. We'll keep him overnight, ma'am. There'll be charges for trespassing, property damage, maybe assault. You'll need to come in tomorrow to give a full statement. I thanked him and closed the door after they left, leaning against it for a long moment. The house felt too quiet, too still. Naomi's sobs filled the silence, and I realized my own hands were still trembling. I led her back to her room, reassuring her that we'd press charges, that we'd handle this legally. But deep down, a pit formed in my stomach. Jason's pride, his obsession, it wouldn't let this go easily. But I knew this wasn't the end. Jason would try something again. The next morning, I woke up to a storm of messages and missed calls. My phone buzzed non-stop on the nightstand, unknown numbers, voicemails, social media notifications. For a few seconds, I couldn't even process what I was seeing. Then I opened one of the messages, and my stomach turned. It was a video clip, Jason, freshly released, ranting online about how I had set him up and stolen his family. His face was red, his voice slurred, and the comments beneath the post were a mix of confusion and mockery. Some people even sided with him, calling me controlling, manipulative, the rich mother-in-law who ruined a marriage. I sat there in bed, my heart pounding, scrolling through the nonsense. Naomi came into the room, still in her robe, looking pale but determined. "He's already online, isn't he?" she asked quietly. I nodded. She sighed and sat beside me. "He posted a bunch of stuff on his story last night. My friends keep texting me about it." I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, that emotional fatigue that comes when someone you once loved keeps finding new ways to hurt you. "Let him post," I said finally. "Every word he says just makes him look worse." I reached for my phone and called my lawyer, Mr. Dorsey, a calm, seasoned man who had handled my estate for years. "Corinne," he greeted me, his tone serious but reassuring. "I saw the video. Don't worry, it's actually good for us. Shows intent, harassment, and no remorse." "I want a restraining order," I said firmly. "For both Naomi and me, I don't want him anywhere near us." "I'll file it immediately," he said. "The break-in and the police report. The judge will likely approve it by tomorrow." After hanging up, Naomi sat across from me at the kitchen table, staring into her untouched coffee. "Mom, I feel guilty," she murmured. "Like, maybe if I'd handled things differently, he wouldn't have done all this." I reached across the table and took her hand. "No, sweetheart. You don't get to take the blame for someone else's rage. He chose this path, not you." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "He's not the man I married," she whispered. "He never was," I said softly. By mid-afternoon, the villa felt tense again, not because of noise or chaos, but because of the heavy quiet. Every car that passed outside made Naomi flinch. I caught myself checking the security cameras every 10 minutes. Trauma has a way of sticking to the air, like humidity. You can't see it, but you feel it everywhere. Around 3 o'clock, my phone rang again. It was Mr. Dorsey. "Good news," he said. "The temporary restraining order was granted. He can't come within 300 feet of you or Naomi, and he's prohibited from contacting either of you directly or indirectly." "Thank you," I said, exhaling for the first time all day. But peace didn't last long. Around 5, Naomi's phone started ringing again, an unfamiliar number. She didn't answer, but after the third missed call, a voicemail came through. The voice on it made her go pale. "It's his mother," she whispered. She played it on speaker. "Naomi," the woman said in a trembling voice, "please don't ruin Jason's life over one mistake. He's just angry. He doesn't mean those things. Talk to him before you drag this to court." Naomi turned off her phone and buried her face in her hands. "They always make it about him," she said, voice cracking. "Never about what he did to me." I stood behind her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't owe them a conversation," I told her. "Or forgiveness. Let the law handle him." That evening, we both sat outside on the terrace, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The ocean shimmered gold and crimson, waves rolling lazily onto the sand. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful again until I noticed something that made my chest tighten. Parked across the street, half hidden under the shade of a palm tree, was a black sedan. Its engine wasn't running, but I could see the faint glow of a phone screen inside. Someone was sitting there, watching. Naomi followed my gaze. "Mom?" she whispered. "Is that—" I didn't answer. I reached for my phone, snapped a photo of the car, and zoomed in on the license plate. My instincts screamed that it wasn't random. The same unease that had crawled through my veins that night returned, stronger than before. Jason might have been ordered to stay away, but people like him rarely listened to rules. Later that evening, I spotted a black car parked near my villa. That same car appeared again the next day and didn't leave. I noticed it early in the morning when I went out to water the hydrangeas near the gate. It was parked in the same spot as the night before, a few yards down the road, its dark windows reflecting the sunlight. I couldn't see who was inside, but I could feel the eyes. Watching. Waiting. I went back inside, shut the gate, and checked my cameras. The car had been there since dawn. Every few minutes, the driver's side window would roll down just a crack, then roll back up. Naomi was still asleep, and I didn't want to wake her until I was sure what I was dealing with. But the longer I watched, the more convinced I became that this wasn't a coincidence. I took a deep breath and called the police station. "It's Corinne Hill again," I said when the dispatcher answered. "I reported a break-in 2 nights ago. I think the same man or one of his friends is sitting outside my house." The dispatcher assured me they'd send a patrol car to check it out. I thanked her and hung up, but my hands were shaking. I'd faced Jason head-on during his worst moments, but this silent intimidation, the quiet, unseen kind, felt worse. It was psychological warfare. When Naomi came downstairs, she immediately sensed my tension. "What's wrong?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "There's a car outside," I said, nodding toward the window. "Black sedan. Been there all morning." She hurried to the blinds, peeked through them, and froze. "That's his friend's car," she whispered. "The one who brought him that night. I remember the plate." That confirmed it. Jason was sending people to watch us. Maybe to scare us, maybe to track our movements, but whatever the reason, it was unacceptable. I decided to take control again. I called a private security company I'd worked with years ago when we installed the villa's alarm system. By noon, 2 technicians arrived to upgrade the cameras, adding motion sensors and real-time alerts linked directly to my phone. They also installed a perimeter system that would send me an immediate notification if anyone stepped onto the property line. Watching them work brought a sense of small comfort, but only for a moment. As the men packed up their tools, Naomi came into the living room with her laptop open. "Mom," she said quietly, "you need to see this." Jason had posted again, this time claiming Naomi was hiding out in luxury with her mother's money, while he was being unfairly persecuted. The comments were brutal. Strangers calling Naomi heartless, others accusing her of lying about the break-in. I could see the pain in her face as she scrolled through them. "Turn it off," I said firmly. "Don't give him the attention he wants. He's trying to get under your skin." Naomi nodded, but tears were already spilling down her cheeks. "He's destroying my reputation, Mom. My friends are asking what's true and what isn't. I feel like I'm the one on trial." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Let him talk," I said softly. "We'll answer with truth and evidence. That's something he doesn't have." That afternoon, the police stopped by. Officer Ramirez, the same one from the night of the break-in, walked up the driveway and removed his hat politely. "Ma'am, we checked the car. The man claims he's just waiting for a friend who lives nearby. But when I asked for an address, he couldn't give one." "So, he's lying," I said. Ramirez nodded grimly. "Most likely. But unless he steps onto your property or makes a direct threat, we can't remove him." I clenched my jaw. "So he gets to sit out there and intimidate us?" "For now, yes," the officer said. "But the restraining order gives you leverage. If we find out Jason sent him, we can act." After Ramirez left, Naomi and I closed all the blinds. The villa felt smaller that day, the walls heavier. The air outside buzzed with the constant hum of that idling car engine, a reminder that our peace was still under siege. I spent the evening writing everything down: times, details, descriptions. My lawyer told me to document every strange occurrence for court. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. I checked the cameras one last time before heading to bed. The car was still there. Sleep didn't come easily. I kept waking up, checking my phone, half expecting to see someone at the door again. Around 3 in the morning, I finally drifted off, only to be jolted awake by a shrill, piercing sound. The security alarm. Naomi screamed from across the hall. I shot out of bed, grabbed my phone, and pulled up the live camera feed. There, in the grainy night vision, a shadow moved near the garage door, slow, deliberate, too large to be an animal. One night, my security alarm went off again. The alarm blared through the halls like a warning I had been expecting. It was a sound that sliced through the night, high-pitched, relentless, impossible to ignore. My heart was already racing before my feet even hit the floor. I grabbed my phone, flicking through the security app with trembling hands. The feed loaded slowly, each second feeling like an eternity. Then the camera focused, and there he was. A dark figure stood near the garage door, head low, shoulders hunched. The shape was unmistakable. Even under the harsh glare of the motion lights, I recognized the stance. The way he moved. Jason. I froze for half a breath, then forced myself into motion. I locked Naomi's bedroom door and whispered through it. "Stay inside, sweetheart. Don't make a sound." She was crying. Voice shaking. "It's him again, isn't it?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I switched on every outdoor light at once. Floodlights burst across the lawn, turning the night into day. The man by the garage flinched and turned toward the light, raising a hand to shield his face. That confirmed it, Jason. He was wearing a black hoodie pulled tight around his head, his face pale and twisted with fury. "Unbelievable," I muttered under my breath. "He's breaking a restraining order the same week it was issued." I hit the emergency button on my phone, alerting both the police and the private security company. Then I activated the villa's loudspeaker system. My voice echoed across the property, sharp and cold. "Jason, you are trespassing again. Leave immediately. You are being recorded." He froze, looking up toward the cameras. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd finally realized how far gone he was. But then he shouted, "You think you can hide her forever?" His voice cracked through the intercom, ragged and desperate. "You ruined my life, Corinne. You turned my wife against me." I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice even. "You ruined your own life, Jason. Now get off my property before you make it worse." He kicked over a flower pot, the ceramic shattering against the tiles. I winced at the sound. My husband had chosen that pot himself years ago. Now it was just debris under Jason's boots. Naomi called from inside her room, muffled by the door. "Mom, are the police coming?" "Yes," I called back, trying to sound steady. "Just stay quiet." I could see Jason pacing, muttering to himself, rubbing his face with both hands like a man unraveling. Then, in a sudden burst of rage, he threw a rock at one of the security lights. The glass shattered, sparks flickering briefly before the light went dark. That was enough for me. "All right," I whispered, pressing the microphone button again. "You want to play games, Jason? Let's show you how adults handle them." I triggered the secondary alarm system, the siren designed for emergency lockdown. The sound was deafening, reverberating through every wall of the villa. Jason stumbled backward, startled by the sheer volume. Lights flashed red along the driveway, a clear signal to the responding officers. Through the blaring noise, I could still hear him shouting, "You can't keep me away forever, she's my wife." He pounded on the garage door with his fists until the skin on his knuckles left smears of red on the metal. Watching him from the monitor, I felt a mix of rage and pity. Rage for what he was doing to us, pity for what he'd become. This wasn't love. It was obsession, ugly, consuming, self-destructive. Within minutes, the sound of sirens rose again in the distance. Jason froze mid-swing, looking toward the main road. His head snapped up as the red and blue lights reappeared, painting the villa walls once more. He backed away slowly, still muttering, still shaking. I could see the moment reality sank in the fear, the regret, the animal instinct to run. He turned and sprinted toward the back of the property, disappearing behind the hedge before the patrol cars even pulled in. I ran downstairs and met the officers at the front door. "He's gone," I said breathlessly. He ran toward the east side. They spread out immediately, flashlights cutting through the dark. For the next hour, they searched the area, their radios crackling. But when they came back, the answer was the one I dreaded. "He's gone, ma'am," Officer Ramirez said grimly. "We'll file an official violation of the restraining order. He won't get away with this." I nodded, though my stomach twisted. I knew Jason too well. He was a man who didn't stop when he lost, he doubled down. And now he was cornered, desperate, and angry. The officers left just before dawn. The villa was quiet again, but the damage was done another layer of fear, another scar. I closed the curtains, checked on Naomi, and sank into a chair in the kitchen, the silence deafening. Police arrived, but Jason was already gone. When the officers couldn't find him, I realized Jason had planned this. He knew exactly where the cameras couldn't see, which way to run, and how long the police usually took to respond. This wasn't a random outburst, it was calculated. He wanted to remind me that even with the law, even with all my defenses, he could still get close enough to rattle me. By sunrise, I was still awake, sitting in the kitchen with a cold cup of coffee and the blinds drawn tight. Naomi came downstairs, her face pale and puffy from crying. "He was here again, wasn't he?" she whispered. I nodded. He broke the restraining order, damaged property, and fled before the police arrived. She sank into the chair across from me, hugging her knees to her chest. "He's never going to stop, is he?" I reached over and took her hand. "He will, maybe not today, but he will. Men like Jason, they burn every bridge until there's nowhere left to stand." After breakfast, I called my lawyer, Mr. Dorsey, and explained everything. "We'll strengthen the case," he assured me. "We've got proof of multiple violations and enough evidence to ensure this goes to trial. He's crossed too many lines to talk his way out now." I thanked him, though part of me still felt uneasy. Jason wasn't just reckless, he was vindictive. And cornering a vindictive man only made him more dangerous. Later that day, a private security guard arrived to monitor the villa full-time. His name was Luke, a tall, calm man who carried himself with quiet authority. "Don't worry, ma'am," he said as he took his post by the front gate. "No one's getting in without going through me first." Naomi seemed relieved to see him there, but I could tell the anxiety hadn't left her. That night, she came into my room, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I don't know if I can stay here anymore. Every sound makes me jump. I can't sleep. I feel trapped." I looked at her, my heart aching. She'd already endured so much, and now the home that should have been her safe place had turned into a cage of memories and fear. "If you want to go somewhere quiet for a while," I said gently, "I'll understand. You can stay with Aunt Miriam upstate. She'd love to have you." Naomi hesitated, then nodded. "Just for a few weeks. I need to breathe." The next morning, I helped her pack. When Luke escorted her to the car, I felt both proud and hollow. Watching her drive away reminded me of when she first left for college, full of hope, unaware of the storms that love could bring. But this time, it wasn't hope I felt. It was resolve. Jason had taken enough from us. He wasn't taking another thing. That afternoon, my lawyer called again. "Corinne," he said, "there's been a development. Jason's court date has been moved up to next week. The district attorney wants you and Naomi to testify." "Good," I replied without hesitation. "We'll be there." I spent the next few days organizing everything: video, recordings, text messages, police reports. Each document felt like another piece of armor. I labeled every file carefully, imagining the look on Jason's face when he realized there was no escaping the truth this time. But despite my focus, I couldn't shake the unease. Every evening, I'd walk through the villa, double-checking the locks and glancing at the cameras. The black car hadn't returned, but sometimes, when the wind rustled through the trees or a light flickered unexpectedly, I still felt like he was watching. When Naomi called to check in, she sounded lighter. "I can actually sleep here," she said. "I went for a walk this morning and didn't look over my shoulder once." Hearing that made me smile for the first time in days. "Good," I told her. "You deserve that peace." Then, one morning, my lawyer called again. "The defense team has submitted a statement," he said. "They're claiming Jason's actions were due to emotional distress, temporary insanity, basically. They're painting him as the victim." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. "Of course they are," I said. "Men like him always are, until someone gets hurt," Dorsey sighed. "Don't worry. We've got too much evidence for him to walk away clean. You just need to stay composed in court." That night, I stood on the balcony, the ocean breeze brushing against my face. I thought about my husband, about the life we built, and about how Jason's chaos had tried to poison it. But as I looked out at the waves, I made myself a promise. I would not let fear take root here again. A week later, the day finally came. Naomi returned, nervous but ready. We dressed in simple, dark clothes, no drama, no spectacle, just truth. As we walked into the courthouse, I saw him for the first time since that night. Jason. Smiling. Calm. Like a man who thought he still had control. The court date arrived, and Jason walked in smiling. The man who once broke into my home now walked into court like he owned it. Jason strolled through the courtroom doors with that same smug, self-assured grin I remembered from the night of the break-in. His suit was pressed, his hair neatly combed, as though he believed looking respectable could erase everything he'd done. The arrogance made my stomach turn. Naomi's hand tightened around mine. "Don't look at him, Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He wants a reaction." She was right. Jason thrived on control, on the illusion that he could still get under our skin. But not today. When the bailiff called the case, the room fell silent. Jason's lawyer stood beside him, a slick-talking man in an expensive suit who introduced his client as a husband suffering from emotional distress. I felt a surge of anger boil up inside me, but I kept my face composed. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, wasted no time. "Mr. Reed," she said, addressing Jason, "you've been charged with trespassing, harassment, property damage, and violation of a restraining order. How do you plead?" Jason glanced at his lawyer before responding. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The words hit me like a slap. Not guilty. The videos, the police reports, the restraining order, he was still trying to gaslight his way out of everything. The prosecution began by playing the security footage. On the screen, Jason appeared wielding the crowbar, shouting at my gate, his face twisted with rage. The sound filled the courtroom. Even knowing what was coming, my chest tightened watching it again. I saw myself behind the camera, calm but terrified, heard Naomi's voice screaming from upstairs. When the footage ended, the judge leaned forward slightly. "That's you in the video, Mr. Reed?" she asked. Jason shrugged. "Yes. But it's not what it looks like. I was trying to talk to my wife. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone." The prosecutor's voice was steady, deliberate. "So, you believe breaking into your mother-in-law's private residence with a crowbar and shouting threats is how one talks to their wife?" Jason's lawyer quickly objected, claiming emotional duress. The judge overruled him. "Proceed," she said curtly. When it was my turn to testify, I walked up to the stand, my heart pounding. Jason's eyes followed me, dark and cold. I refused to look back. I swore the oath and sat down, my palms pressed flat against my knees to keep them steady. The prosecutor asked me to recount the night of the incident. My voice stayed calm as I explained everything, the threatening texts, the videos, the break-in, the police response. I made sure every word was clear, factual, irrefutable. Jason's lawyer tried to rattle me on cross-examination. "Mrs. Hill," he began, his tone slick, "isn't it true that you've never approved of your son-in-law? That you saw him as beneath your daughter from the very beginning?" I met his gaze without flinching. "I didn't approve of his behavior," I said. "But that's not what this is about. This is about a man who broke into my property, threatened my daughter, and violated the law." He smiled, trying to seem polite. "So this isn't a case of a mother-in-law meddling, but of legitimate fear?" "Yes," I replied firmly, "fear for my daughter's life." The judge watched me intently. Jason looked down, his smirk fading ever so slightly. Then Naomi took the stand. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, strength seeped into every word. She described how Jason's temper had escalated over time, how he controlled her, isolated her, and used intimidation as affection. She said quietly, "The man who broke into that house isn't the man I thought I married. I'm not sure he ever was." I watched Jason's face as she spoke. His jaw clenched, his nostrils flared, but he stayed silent. His lawyer whispered something to him, trying to keep him calm, but Jason's composure was cracking. The prosecution ended by submitting every recording, every message, every police report. The case against him was airtight. Finally, the judge turned to Jason. "Do you have anything to say for yourself before I render a decision?" Jason stood, his voice quivering with false emotion. I loved my wife, he said. Everything I did was because I was desperate to get her back. I made mistakes, but I'm not a criminal. I'm a husband who lost everything. The judge's face remained unreadable. You'll receive my judgment tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Court adjourned. Jason's lawyer touched his shoulder, urging him to sit, but Jason turned toward me and Naomi instead. His eyes locked on ours, full of quiet fury. You think you've beaten me, he whispered, just loud enough for us to hear. But I don't break that easy. Security escorted him out, but that stare lingered long after he was gone. Naomi's hand trembled in mine as we left the courtroom. He's still trying to scare us, she said. Yes, I whispered, but tomorrow, he won't be able to. The judge announced that sentencing would be delivered the next morning. That night before sentencing, I couldn't sleep, my mind replayed every moment. Every crash, every shout, every terrified breath echoed in my head like a broken record. The villa was silent except for the rhythmic waves outside. But my thoughts were anything but calm. I sat in the living room. The glow of the security monitors painting the walls with faint light. Naomi was upstairs trying to rest, though I doubted she'd manage any more sleep than I did. Tomorrow, everything would finally be decided. I thought about the first time Jason had come into our lives, how he'd shaken my hand with that charming grin, promising to take care of my daughter. I'd believed him then, wanted to believe him. I thought Naomi had found someone steady, someone who'd love her as fiercely as her father had loved me. But people like Jason don't love, they possess, they conquer. And when they lose control, they destroy. Around midnight, Naomi came downstairs, wrapped in a blanket. Can't sleep either? She asked, sitting beside me. I shook my head. Too many ghosts in this house tonight. She gave a small, sad smile. Do you think he'll go to jail? I looked at her, my beautiful, exhausted daughter, and wished I could promise her the justice she deserved. He'll be punished, I said finally. Maybe not as much as he should, but enough to keep him away. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. I just want to move on, Mom. I don't even hate him anymore. I just want peace. Peace is exactly what we'll have after tomorrow, I said, though part of me wondered if I was trying to convince myself more than her. When morning finally came, the sky was overcast, the ocean unusually still. We dressed quietly, black slacks, simple blouses, nothing flashy, just respectful. As we drove to the courthouse, I caught our reflection in the car window. Two women carrying the same weariness, the same resolve. Inside the courtroom, the tension was thick. Jason was already there, sitting beside his attorney. He looked different this time, not confident, not furious, just drained. His hands were clasped in front of him, and his eyes darted toward us as we walked in. For once, there was no smirk. The judge entered, and everyone stood. This court is now in session for the sentencing of Jason Reed, the bailiff announced. The judge adjusted her glasses and glanced over the file in front of her. Mr. Reed, she began. I've reviewed all evidence, testimonies, and reports. Your actions show a pattern of intimidation, manipulation, and disregard for lawful boundaries. While the court acknowledges your claim of emotional distress, it does not excuse criminal behavior. Jason swallowed hard. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably beside him. The judge continued, her voice steady. You entered private property without consent, caused physical damage, violated a restraining order, and subjected both victims to emotional harm. Therefore, I find you guilty on all counts. The room went silent. Naomi reached for my hand and squeezed it. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but relief. Finally, someone had spoken the truth aloud. Given the evidence, the judge said, you are sentenced to 12 months of community service, mandatory counseling for anger management, and 1 year of probation. The restraining order is hereby extended for 5 years. I felt my breath leave me in one long exhale. It wasn't prison, but it was accountability. Legal, permanent, written in ink. Jason wouldn't be able to come near us without risking jail time. Jason sat there, staring straight ahead. His face was unreadable, no rage, no shock, just quiet defeat. For the first time, I saw the man beneath the mask. Small. Powerless. Broken. Naomi began to cry softly beside me. "It's over," she whispered. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the judge as she finalized the paperwork. "It's over," I echoed. When the session adjourned, Jason turned slightly toward us. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something that made him nod once. Then, without a word, he stood and walked out. No glare, no parting threats, just silence. And somehow, that silence was the most powerful moment of all. Outside, the air felt lighter. Naomi stood on the courthouse steps, looking up at the gray sky. "I thought I'd feel angry," she said quietly. "But I don't. I just feel free." I smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "That's what strength feels like," I told her. "Not anger, just freedom." We stood there for a long time, letting the world move around us. The nightmare had finally loosened its grip. But deep down, I knew I wasn't done yet. Jason had to understand something that no court sentence could teach him: what true ownership meant, and what real strength looked like. I decided to do one final thing to make sure Jason never forgot this lesson. I invited him legally to witness exactly who owned the villa he tried to take. It wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. About reclaiming what Jason had tried so hard to poison with fear. The court had done its part, but I needed to do mine. I needed to stand in the very place he'd invaded and prove to him, to Naomi, and to myself that this home, our peace, and our future still belonged to us. 2 months after sentencing, life at the villa had finally begun to feel normal again. The repairs were done, the locks upgraded, the garden replanted. Naomi had moved back in for a while, helping me restore everything Jason had damaged. It wasn't just about fixing walls or replacing lights, it was about rebuilding trust in our space. The ocean felt calmer, the air cleaner, and the silence peaceful instead of tense. One morning, as we sat having coffee on the terrace, Naomi asked, "Mom, why haven't you sold this place? You could start fresh somewhere else." I smiled at her. "Because running isn't strength," I said softly. "Standing your ground is." That was when I decided to hold a small gathering at the villa, a community event to showcase my late husband's art collection, newly restored after years in storage. The local gallery offered to sponsor it, and I made sure it would be public enough for one person in particular to hear about it. Through his lawyer, I sent Jason a formal invitation, not out of kindness, but out of confidence. Naomi was hesitant. "Mom, are you sure that's a good idea?" "Yes," I said. "He needs to see what he lost, not because we took it from him, but because he tried to take it by force." The night of the event arrived with a soft ocean breeze. The villa glowed with golden light, guests mingling on the terrace, the sound of gentle music weaving through the laughter and conversation. I wore a simple navy dress, my hair pulled back, my heart steady. Naomi stayed close, radiant in her calm, finally herself again. Halfway through the evening, as I was speaking to a curator near one of the large windows, I saw a familiar figure at the gate, Jason. Dressed neatly, standing behind a uniformed escort from his probation office. For a moment, the air seemed to tighten, but then I noticed something different. His shoulders weren't squared anymore. His head was slightly bowed. He looked small, like a shadow of the man who once tried to terrify us. The guard spoke quietly to him before opening the gate. Jason stepped onto the driveway, his gaze sweeping over the lights, the guests, the laughter. The villa looked nothing like the fortress he'd tried to storm. It looked like a home again. I met him halfway, keeping my voice even. "Jason," I greeted. "I didn't expect you to actually come." He glanced around awkwardly. "I thought I should see it. The place." I wanted to apologize. I studied him for a long moment. The arrogance, the fire, it was gone. In its place was something hollow. "Apologies don't rebuild what you tried to destroy," I said quietly. "But seeing this? Maybe it'll remind you that control and love aren't the same thing." He nodded faintly, eyes darting toward Naomi, who stood on the terrace, watching but not hiding. She didn't flinch this time. She simply gave him a polite, measured nod. Jason's voice cracked slightly. I know I can't take it back, he said. Any of it? No, I replied. You can't, but you can learn from it. We stood there for a few moments in silence, the sea breeze tugging at the edges of our clothes, the hum of conversation behind us. For the first time, I didn't feel fear when I looked at him. I felt pity. Because I finally saw what he truly was, a man who'd lost everything by his own hand. When he turned to leave, I said, Jason. He stopped, glancing back. This villa, this life, it's not yours, and it never was. But the peace you see here tonight, that's what happens when you let go of hate. He didn't respond. He just nodded once, then walked back toward the gate. Naomi came to stand beside me, her hand slipping into mine. Together, we watched him disappear down the road until the night swallowed him completely. I took a deep breath, the ocean air filling my lungs. For the first time in what felt like years, the villa was truly quiet. No alarms, no shouting, no fear, just calm. Naomi leaned her head on my shoulder. You did it, Mom, she whispered. You took it all back. I smiled, squeezing her hand gently. No, I said softly. We did. I finally reclaimed both my villa and my peace.